Hello and welcome to the meeting room out of office at IMEX Frankfurt. I'm here with Chloe Richardson, the head of content at ELX and a freelance coach and consultant. Hello Chloe, welcome to the show.
Hi Paul, thanks for having me.
Now you've been very busy at IMEX because you had the ELX forum yesterday, is that right? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so we have 4 in-person events with ELX, and for those that don't know, ELX is a community for global heads of events of the Fortune 500. And so how we work is we're obviously year-round, but we meet in person 4 times.
Yeah.
And 2 of those times are at each IMEX. So we have an almost tag-along mini event as part of our program. And on the first day of IMEX, we meet separately with ELX, and we have our members in a room, and we do loads of educational sessions, loads of workshops, loads of open discussions. And the goal really, especially at the Frankfurt one, is for our European members to take away some great practical tips on how to be future-ready leaders and how to use various different technologies and generally how to navigate through current turbulent times as an event leader.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot to talk about how to navigate through current times, but one of the things that you were talking about was kind of like remote teams.
One of the biggest sessions we had yesterday, we had an external expert come in and do a session and workshop on how to be a leader when so many teams are now remote, that the idea of having an innate culture has been lost. Now, this has come as a result of COVID, but actually it was heading that way anyway. COVID just accelerated the move. And so we did an hour and 45 session with him. And then today, some of our members took to the floor at IMEX to share some of their key takeaways and headlines from the session with the wider event community. Because for us, yes, we want our members to flourish and thrive, but it's also important that we drive the industry forward generally and positively. And so by sharing a couple of valuable nuggets that we learn in the ELX room, hopefully that means that others can start to adopt techniques and strategies to also be better at whatever it is. And in this case, it was all about how to lead remote teams.
Can you share them with us? How do you lead a remote team?
Yeah.
What's the
Oh my goodness,
key?
I'll pick a few headlines out. The first one was really around meetings and how can you make virtual meetings intentional and deliberate and not being a bit of a time suck, which I find so many of us experience. At the moment, most global heads will do a weekly team meeting for an hour. They might have regional meetings for a couple of hours, and it all adds up, and that becomes very expensive. And if you go into those meetings without a really clear agenda, and if you go into those meetings without allowing your team to really contribute, then actually they can do more harm than good. So one of the practical takeaways I got from yesterday was we need to give our teams the space to be able to contribute equally. And when you do that, that really cultivates a strong team ethic and culture because you're giving them the floor. So they feel more invested in meetings. So they feel like their voice is being heard. And so they feel like part of a team. So that was one great tip when you're managing remote teams. And another one, somebody else was saying, never go into a call without an agenda because then you lose focus and you lose purpose. And one great way to make your team feel disillusioned and isolated is by making them spend their time on a call where they feel like they shouldn't be there. So really defining what that agenda is, what that key purpose and meaning of that meeting is. That was another one. And then the third one in terms of actual meetings was if you are the leader, talk last. So let someone else in your team, so either delegate the speaker for that particular town hall or team meeting, and then you should just literally be wrapping it up at the end. Because again, that's a pull and pull technique that allows your team to feel like they're important and that their voice matters. And I really liked that because I've worked remotely since 2013, so it's been quite a while for me. But I know for many people this is relatively new, and the idea of being able to still build a culture is important. And actually I wrote down a quote, that's why I've got my iPad pulled. There was one quote that I really loved. And the speaker yesterday, Toby, he said, culture is going to exist within your team regardless. So you have to ask yourself, is your culture by accident or is it by design? And I loved that. I thought that was so powerful. And it just makes you take a step back and think, how can I implement some really practical strategies to make my culture deliberate and intentional and impactful? And that was one of the key things that we talked about.
I guess this is the kind of thing that you're talking about at all the ELX forums.
There's so many different topics. At the moment, and this year we found that talent and team management has been one of the hot topics because so many teams are having to let go of resources, they're being squeezed for budgets, we're seeing loads of people being let go. And it seems like we're saying this far too often now, but it's a turbulent time for event professionals. And so we're finding that a lot of global events are struggling to attract top talent, struggling to then keep top talent, but then also struggling to drive efficiencies within teams without being a micromanager. So that's one of the things we've been talking about quite a lot. But then there's so many, like we talk about centralization quite a lot. We talk about event measurement. That's obviously a core topic because a lot of people say that if you learn to measure the impact of your event more effectively using the right data, then you can prove the value to your senior leadership and therefore they'll stop cutting your budgets. So they'll give you more investment. So that's also a big piece. Obviously, in the US, there's a lot of talk around the current political climate and how are tariffs impacting costs, but also how is travel being impacted, and should we be worried, as we were in 2020, about how this might affect the industry? Loads of things.
Should we be worried?
Coming into the US or leaving the US could be more difficult. It could get to a stage where it's more expensive and we can't justify those costs anymore. So we need to be really serious about thinking, what are our plan Bs? What's our contingency plan? If this doesn't work, what are we going to do? So I think there is room to be worried, not just with our ELX members, but conversations I have on a daily basis. There are so many event professionals who are seeing firsthand the effects of what's going on geopolitically. I know people who've had their women's conferences pulled 2 weeks before the show was about to take place. I know people who've had their diversity education programs scrapped, and some of these are from huge organizations. And it's so sad, and it feels like we're taking such a big step back. And it's easy for us in Europe. I mean, we're surrounded right now by so many of our European peers. It's so easy for us to sit back and say it doesn't affect us. But first of all, everything in the events industry affects us. And second of all, if it's happening there, there's a good chance one day it could start to happen here. So we need to be ready. It's going to impact business, and therefore it's going to impact events. And it's probably going to impact business objectives, which events should obviously always support. So we're all part of this big wheel, and we need to be paying attention. We need to be getting ready. We need to have plans in place, and we need to have really good contingency plans. And what we're doing at ELX is producing a travel dossier for any of our members coming to our events, so they have exactly what they need at customs, so that if they're asked a question from any security, whatever country they might be going into, they have the answers in hard copy so they can present that back. And we just want to make it as smooth as possible. I'd recommend that everyone starts doing things like that. I know IMEX actually have a similar policy for when all of their staff fly into Vegas, for example, in October. They have like a hard copy dossier of every answer any airport security team member would need.
It's potentially a lot more to think about for event planners then in the future.
Yeah, and it's such a shame because I think we were getting to a point where the hangover of the pandemic was long behind us, and we started to be more innovative in our thinking, and our designs have started to evolve, and I'm seeing some great customer conferences and obviously use of AI, and the experiences that we're creating are so exciting, and it's almost like, oh, not another spanner in the works, because it becomes a distraction. Because when you're worrying so much about how your teams are going to be affected by travel bans, you're not focusing your attention on the stuff that really matters. And that's my worry when it feels like we had a bit of momentum. And you can see big trade shows, big customer events doing stuff that they've never done before over the last couple of years. And it's been so exciting, and leveraging personalization and adapting content, which is what I do a lot of, to make it so much more engaging and attendee focused. All of that stuff has been great over the last few years, and I'm just worried that now that we're distracted with other things, we might let that slip. Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
Yes.
No. So that's a nice positive note to end on, I think.
Yeah.